Um, Welcome to Music for Everyone Songs for Justice Volume 2 webinar. Thanks for tuning in. I am John Gertie, and I'm the founder and executive director of Music for Everyone, and I will host the webinar. Just real quickly, I want to give you the narrative on this Songs for Justice project. You know, music has always been a powerful platform to highlight, frame, and spur change regarding issues related to justice and equality and equity. While we all have a responsibility to bear witness to events around us, for musicians and artists, that responsibility is far more fundamental. It is the essence of what they do. Nina Simone articulated this well. You can't help it. An artist's duty is to reflect the times. Now more than ever, musicians and artists have the responsibility to leverage their voices to illuminate injustice and inequity in an effort to inspire and hopefully stimulate change. Songs for Justice is a convergence of music, spoken word, visual arts, poetry, history, as well as discussion questions into a series of vinyl 45 records that include inspiring and educational information and resources to stimulate dialogue and ultimately healing and change. Each record will feature various leaders, events, and narratives around an array of civil and human rights, causes, and issues. We hope that each of these records and the music, speeches, art, and information contained in them will provide context and insight to inspire you to reflect upon and act upon issues relating to justice, equity, and equality. Today's Volume 2 webinar, Volume 2, which will actually be released in the next week or so, the actual physical copy of the record, will highlight issues around LGBTQ rights and issues. And before introducing the panel, I would be remiss if I did not recognize or thank the sponsors who have made this happen. They include the Presser Foundation, Lancaster County Community Foundation, Benchmark Construction, Lancaster History, List Track, Atlee Hall, Fulton Bank, High Industries, Rhodes Energy, Thaddeus Stevens Society, Telus 360, and Giant. And with that, I would like to introduce today the panel who will be a part of this discussion. First is Hadassah. Hadassah is a Lancaster-based musician, and her song "Strange Fire" is featured on side 1 of the record. And side B of the record is always going to be a civil rights speech or a famous court ruling. In this case, it was a court ruling that legalized same-sex marriage in the U.S. Supreme Court decision. That's side B. Liz Fulmer is a board member of the LGBTQ+ Coalition of Lancaster, and she's also a singer and songwriter in her own right. Karen Foley is the executive director of the coalition, and the coalition is the featured community benefit organization. On each of these records, we are featuring a community benefit organization that is doing good work in the areas that we're featuring. So this one we're featuring the LGBTQ+ Coalition of Lancaster, and Karen is the executive director. In addition, we will provide the coalition with 100 copies of the record to do whatever they want to do with them, whether it's sell them or provide them to donors as a thank you, but in any way that it can contribute to the cause that they're doing such good work in. So that's how and why we're featuring the community benefit organizations. Then we have Kaya Hobbs. Kaya Hobbs is a Lancaster-based multidisciplinary artist. Her artwork is featured in this Volume 2. It's a piece called Queer Liberation that you will be
showing. My pronouns are they, them. It's they, them.
Yes, I'm sorry. And Brian Graves, Lancaster-based poet, piece titled All the Varying Colors that he will read a little bit later. or they, them will read a little bit later. I'm learning too, y'all. We're all learning, trying to figure it all out. But at any rate, so how about we just start into the discussion. And we really want to start with the role that artists and poets and musicians and writers play in any sort of social justice or movement in terms of how artists and musicians bear witness to what's going on in the world today. So I want to ask each of y'all to talk to the issue of the role and responsibility of artists, musicians as it applies to issues of justice and equality. And the way we're going to do that is first we will play a short clip from Hadassah's song. And Brendan's going to cue it up and we will listen to that. And on the back end, we will ask Hadassah to speak about it, what inspired her to write the song.
I'll just keep it to myself. I'll borrow time, won't kiss and tell. Love as long as you desire. To the grave I'll take this strange fire.
Outstanding. Hadassah, want to tell us about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to point out that the background vocals are by the lovely Liz Fulmer, if you can't already tell, who has always just done a phenomenal job of backing my vocals and singing with me. So very happy about that. As for the inspiration of the song and the role that I feel I play, specifically with social justice or advocating, maybe specifically in terms of LGBTQ, is, for one thing, I feel it's very important to provide representation and provide someone that anyone who is struggling can relate to. Like, we need relatable artists, we need relatable art. And when there is none, there is a feeling of isolation, there's a feeling of being alienated from the culture around you, from the people around you. And, you know, for me, writing this song kind of was stemmed from the feeling of, okay, growing up queer and not knowing really what that meant, or knowing how I could do that without, you know, leaving my community and losing everything that I held dearly. I ended up falling in love with a lot of my best friends and people that I didn't know what was going on. I just had these close relationships that were my girlfriends, and suddenly it's like, what's happening? Why do I feel this way? Because there wasn't anybody to talk to about it. There wasn't the acceptance of that being an option for me, or that being somebody that I could be. So instead, it really made a lot of my friendships kind of difficult and hard to maneuver. So this is just that song of, it's going to happen, especially if you are raised in a conservative religious community and you are encouraged to have these really like deep, intimate relationships and friendships, but encouraged to be in this binary of heteronormity. I think that you're often going to cross that line of developing feelings, and that's at least what happened to me. So it's kind of just the ode to the queer old heartbreak on some level. And in terms of what an artist's job is for social justice, I mean, if you have a place to speak from, especially like if you have a place to speak from and it's not just about the things that you suffer from and are your plight, I think that there's always something that an artist can be doing to be bringing a voice to the voiceless, whether that is through written, through all the different arts. I think that it's really important that we speak for those who are not being heard, especially when we do have an audience.
All right. Thank you very much. Next, we are going to display Kaya's work. Brendan is going to put that on the screen, and then Kaya will comment. Nope.
So sorry, I don't know if I'm supposed to be speaking right now or not, but okay, so I did this piece like a little while ago, and when I was asked to do this cover for the vinyl, I happened to have this like kind of ready. Like I ended up kind of making it into something new, but your comments are making me laugh. I don't know. When I think of like that whole decision of legalizing marriage and everything, like, and like my duty as an artist to speak about it, I think it's important for me to mention everything we did to get to that point and all of the work we still have left to do. And my personal role as an artist, I think, in looking for justice and liberation has been to be completely authentic in the way that I present myself to the public. I kind of grew up with this idea of me being like too much or too loud or too different or too queer, even before I realized I was queer. And I guess what I've been learning now that I'm a more part of like the art scene around here, it's been like learning how to be uncomfortable in spaces and still thrive in them, and kind of create that space for people that haven't been able to do that or learn that. Like what Hadassah was saying before, like there's people that can't speak for themselves, but I can. I'm very loud and I'm very here. And I think the most important thing as a whole for everybody to do is to just be big, be loud, take up that space, speak about your experiences, and just be completely authentic about it, completely transparent, because eventually someone's going to hear that and it could very well like bring some kind of change for them. And I think that is so important as an artist, as a musician, any interaction with creativity in general, I think is one of the most liberating things you can do for people, is to show them that there's someone out there that thinks like them or has been through something like they have. So that's all I got.
That's good. That's enough. That's enough. Thank you very much. And okay, so next we will ask Brian to read all the varying colors is Brian's piece of poetry that he will read for us now. He, they, God dog. God dog. Brian, you there? Have we lost Brian?
I believe so. They are having a little difficulty. So you might want to see if you can reconnect them.
Yeah, let's go. I'll tell you, we'll save that. Hopefully the issues will be resolved and we can come back to here. Okay. Does anyone else have anything to say about any more? I mean, Liz, you can comment on this as well as a musician and songwriter in terms of the role of the artist as it applies to bearing witness to what's going on in the world today.
Yeah, I think that artists have a unique vantage point. They see things and then can communicate things in such a way that only art can communicate. So speaking as a musician, you know, they say that music gets stuck in your head. Music is sticky. And I think because of that stickiness, you can communicate a message that will linger, you know, even after the song ends, because you find yourself returning to it, humming it. It's stuck. It sticks in your subconscious. And I think that gives time for the message of the song to really sink in, whether it's a message of affirmation and solidarity and encouragement, or for somebody who's not affirming, if it's a catchy song spreading an affirming message that they have to sort of sit uncomfortably with, the stickiness of the song can act almost like a thorn or as something that continues to work on them. And in that way, I think music can help alleviate some of the burden that falls especially on LGBTQ people in terms of trying to convince those around them to be affirming. So music is like an extra tool in that way.
Okay. How about this question? How can the arts community come together to advance causes related to justice, equity, equality, whether with LGBTQ or other issues, other social justice issues, just in general? How can we bring the arts community together to have a more effective voice in that regard? Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I do, actually, because that's one of the things that I've been like talking about since I've moved to Lancaster. I noticed that there's a lot of different sections of the art community around here, but there's not really like a collective effort to give everyone a platform. I've noticed a lot with especially with the Black and Brown queer community. A lot of the time it seems like we're kind of banging on a wall, trying to get people to pay attention to what we're doing and have our voices heard. And I feel like people take all of these different sections and do everything they can to separate it so that there's some kind of I don't know, niche, I guess. They're trying to create their own image. But I think a more broad scope of everyone here would be a lot more beneficial, not just to Lancaster, but people observing. Show people what an intersectional community actually looks like, as opposed to the different parts and all their separate purposes. So I've been trying really hard to actually build a community of every person I can think of and put us all out into the world and have everyone's voices heard all at the same time. So yeah, more collective effort. That's what we need.
And anyone want to add to that?
I think on some level it is the responsibility of obviously artists across the board, but also booking agents, production managers, all these people who are actually organizing these events, really understanding that they need to go outside of their norm, outside of their network and their connect sometimes to really create the opportunities. I think sometimes that means, okay, who has rehearsal spaces that they can allow to be used by artists who don't have access to rehearsal spaces? There are a lot of things that the arts community really should be doing to really be elevating the voices of those who are not being elevated and not being heard. But that means that some of the people who have those, have the leverage and have access need to provide that access, So I would just encourage the music community, whether that is the administrative and planning, music community, or it's the artists, the bands, to really start thinking about what access they have and how they can share it.
Yeah, I want to add something to that, just as a to bolster that. One of the things that we have been pleasantly surprised with in terms of undergoing this Songs for Justice project. Of course, after the George Floyd murder and the civil unrest that followed, we did this social justice statement like a lot of organizations did, but we wanted to do more. And the more we've got involved in this, we have found the number of doors that it's opened for us. I mean, I knew Hadassah, I knew Liz, I really didn't know Brian and Karen or Kai all that much, or at all. And it's made us a much, much better organization from top to bottom. And it's even impacted other programs. For example, the people that we've met through this project, we have also been able to incorporate those folks into other projects like our Music Fridays and our Keys for the City program, our mural program. So my point is, I think what you're talking about is more communication, more building bridges. And I think this project, for what it's done for our organization, Music for Everyone, it's a case study in how diversity makes you stronger as an organization. We're seeing it every day. It's been one of the most wonderful things in terms of the development of Music for Everyone that we really didn't see coming along. We hoped for it, but it's really, really proven out in that, diversity truly, it's a strength. It's a strength. It's like a good gumbo, right? The more spices you put in, the better the gumbo tastes, right? So anyway, I think we're talking along the same lines. With that said, we do have Brian back. All right, he's standing out in the street. They're standing out in the street, but that's okay. Please read all the varying colors for us, Brian. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I would like to apologize both after and in advance. I had to flee my house to Chestnut Hill Cafe, and my computer is still telling me that my internet connection is unstable. So if I cut out again, sorry about that. But yes, this is my poem, All the Varying Colors. All the varying colors, my child, like gumballs in a candy store, will sing into your mouth forevermore, wrap you like ribbons, soft to feel. Cast the brightest shadow, my child, light the love in each and every eye, a trail of gumballs to be left behind, lead them up and into the sky. This world is a big dirty disco ball, so sleep in your makeup and dream when you wake up. Be sure to feel all the varying colors.
I love that. I really left the world is a dirty, what's a dirty gumball? Or no, disco ball. That's brilliant. That was brilliant. So tell us, what inspired you on this?
I think my main inspiration was children and encouraging children to be their most authentic selves always. Children and creativity and queerness and all of that stuff, like they're all a huge passion of mine, and education is a huge part of children's development. And I wanted to just like say thank you to Music for Everyone for continuing to keep educational arts alive here in Lancaster and in the lives of these children, the children that live here. But I also wanted to write something that was inspirational and like readable to queer elders and my own queer peers, like in my same age demographic, to do the same, living authentically, unapologetically, and fully. It was hard. I've never written anything like within parameters. Everything that I've written creatively has always been like my own thing that like I'm sharing myself, and it can be as personal or as like deep or at times like profane as I wanted it to be. And it was a nice exercise to write something that would be readable for a 3rd grader, a 10th grader, a 25-year-old, a 70-year-old, or whoever may come across it. So that was a really nice opportunity. And I wanted to signify like color and pay homage to the pride flag without being so explicit. And that's kind of where the idea of gumballs came from, and the ribbons as well, is that like those are colorful things, and like gumballs in a candy store kind of represent like life's beautiful and colorful opportunities that it's constantly offering us, and just kind of saying that we shouldn't shy away from those opportunities and those experiences. Like it's necessary that we as queer people continue to live full lives and do that knowing that like kind of letting like the cis heteronormative world that we live in know that like we're not going to go anywhere. Like we're here to stay. We've always been here. And more importantly, so that like the generations to come after us, the children that are here now, so that they have inspiration as well, and that they know that they're valid and that they're loved, and that they have a community to look for and to find and to cherish and hold and to cultivate. And I think the last stanza about like the world being like a big dirty disco ball is that like this world is messed up. This world has its faults. This world isn't the cleanest, most put together thing. So don't expect yourself to be like that all the time. Don't expect yourself to do everything well the first time you do it. Don't expect yourself to already know what's going on or who you are. Like you're allowed to mess up. You're allowed to you're allowed to mess up and have mistakes, but learn from them, and also allow yourself the space to, like sleep in your makeup if you want to, just as long as you're always dreaming, even when you're awake, and you're constantly looking for more opportunities, looking to grow, looking to have those experiences and cherish them. I think that's really what this poem's about, and it's for the children, but it's for everyone as well. It's for all of the queer folks that are here and in this world.
Thank you. That was very well said. Very well said. Okay, so let's bring the discussion and ask Karen and Liz, but others can add. Here's a question that we'd like you to discuss. There's some complexities within the LGBTQ plus community around the Marriage Equality Act, and that Marriage Equality Act, it's the Supreme Court decision of June 26, 2015, which was read by Marshall Snively on side B of this record that we're featuring. Obergefell versus Hodges, affirming the right for same-sex couples to marry. Telly, can you elaborate on that? The complexities around the marriage equality, because from what I understand, from what I'm learning, it's not nearly as clear cut as you might think. Is that accurate? Karen, do you want to comment on that?
Sure, I can. I think that it sort of was echoed by most of the folks that spoke today, that oftentimes in our community, progress is advanced by sort of a heteronormative lens, right? And so this idea that like, here you go, here's your little crumb, you get to get married now, right? So that like there should never have been a situation where we couldn't. Yeah. So I think there's a frustration from our community in that sense, but also just, given the way that privilege works out, sort of cis white gay men tend to be at the forefront of some of these movements, and that oftentimes the first steps in progress tend to directly benefit sort of that demographic, right? And it tends to leave out, which we all see now, the gender identity issues. A lot of most of our transgender and non-binary community members have zero rights or protections. So I think right now focusing on the Equality Act and making sure that we all have protections is hopefully our biggest focus right now. Liz?
Yeah, I can only echo what Karen said, but of all the inequalities, why marriage was the one that got so much support and people rallied around it. And it is because what Karen says, it fits into that palatable mold. Where, rather than being just like you, we should be celebrated and welcomed in or affirmed, or whatever word you want to use, for the sheer fact of our humanity. Like that should be enough, regardless of any other difference. So, yeah, there shouldn't have to be any mold fitting for another person to affirm someone's humanity, is what it comes down to.
Anyone else want to comment?
Yeah. So I actually, like, personally, I don't see myself getting married at any point, and I'm really happy for all the couples that waited for that. But I don't know, being a queer Black MB artist, I'm definitely waiting for a lot more. Like, I mean, trans people still, like they both said, they still don't get the same recognition and respect as a cis white gay male. Like, that's just not okay with me at this point. And I don't know, this country, frankly, is like severely lacking in its understanding of its existence of queer people, and that just has to change. And I honestly think we should start like with like our education system. Like, think about sex education. The very first thing you learn is like, this is how you procreate. They don't talk to you about sex. They don't talk to you about like queer sex. They don't explain to you that there's different ways of like showing love to someone, or like don't even talk about being asexual, like things like that. There's a severe lack of like the full scope of what it means to love someone. And I think that if we're going to be talking about equality in some sense, it should absolutely start with the way that we're speaking to our youth, especially about the world around them, especially including queer people. So.
You mentioned the educational system. One of the things that we are doing with this project is we are working with the school district of Lancaster and the folks there who develop curriculum. And our hope on this project is that, when we get these 10 or 12, however many records we end up doing, all done, we're trying to all tie them all into a curriculum that can be used by schools or community groups, and use these records and the speeches and the music and the poems and the historical references as for curriculum to teach around these issues, to generate discussion, awareness, and hopefully inspire folks to be a part of the change. But yes, that's you mentioned that, and that struck a chord with, because that's another aspect of this project that we're trying to incorporate, make it into a curriculum to teach about these issues. Anyone else have anything to say on that?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear more about your curriculum plans and ideas, like whenever those are more fleshed out, or I'd love to be part of that if possible. But I think echoing like what Karen and Liz and Kaya have all said is that, like, in my opinion, the idea of marriage and domesticality and families in the world, but let alone in America, has been changing so much over the past few years. And I think marriage is something that it's historically, it's a very like cis heteronormative thing to do, and to like, you have to do this thing to raise the family in the way that you want to raise it, or the world wants you to raise it. But I think it's also interesting, like, and we see this during Pride Month a lot. Queerness is very commodifiable, especially in June, because everybody can like have, suddenly there's queer merch everywhere. There's flag merch everywhere. There's this merch, that merch, which is lovely, because I mean, we should be able to have garb and have accessories that signify who we are. But at the same time, I think marriage is another one of those things, even with cis people and with cis het people, that is commodifiable. It's a business. People are able to make money off of marriages. The government is able to make money off of marriages, businesses as well. So it's just like, it's one of those things where I think marriage was the easiest thing for them to kind of give us, in terms of still being able to make money off of us. Like, education is a very different thing in that regard. Healthcare is a very different thing in that regard. All kinds of different things. I think marriage was just the one that they were like, well, we can still make money in this way. So that's kind of my comment on that. I agree with what everybody else has said so far as well.
Yeah, I am happily married, and I'm very grateful that I get to be married and have that marriage be recognized. And also, that marriage is not essential for my life, like the fact of my living and breathing every day. But healthcare, access to healthcare is. There are a lot more essential things that have not gotten the same kind of focus. And Brian is absolutely right. And we could talk about capitalism, but that might be a conversation for another day.
That's a whole nother webinar. Right. Anyone else want to add anything? Hadassah, looks like you want to.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and there's, like, marriage is a great plus. It's a, whatever, an addition, something that some people want to do and some people don't. Some people find it very meaningful and some people don't. And that's a huge, not everyone in the gay community wants to get married. A lot of them don't. But I think most of us do want to see our brothers and sisters and non-binary friends like actually get protection. Like, we're seeing still a lot of abuse. We're seeing still a lot of attacks on people who do not present in a way that is safe for them in this country. And yet we do not see protection. We do not see protection from the police. In fact, the exact opposite a lot of the time, where they are less safe with the police being involved. So the fact that on Trans Day of Remembrance, there are still so many names read is an example of why we need much more aggressive protections for the people in this community who are not being seen, they are not being represented. And most of the time it is trans people of color that are being beaten and murdered. And this is something that, they shouldn't have to be talking about. They shouldn't have to bear the labor and the pain of pushing that agenda, of bringing it to awareness. But more often than not, you don't see the white queer people really pushing it. You don't see a lot of often I find that the lesbian and gay community who are a little bit more binary, they're happy where they are. And I would love to see a change of perspective in seeing the entire community and wanting to fight for everyone, no matter whether they fit in that binary and kind of heteronormative lifestyle or not.
Anyone else? I have another question. that we're curious about. So there are many people who want to do the right thing in supporting the LGBTQ plus community. What would you suggest regarding things both big and small that people can do?
So I'll go ahead and start. I think the first big thing you could do is just listen to our stories. There's no one perspective or experience. And an even bigger thing is, like we were speaking about earlier, just provide space or help cultivate spaces for queer people. If you see somebody struggling to, connect to a resource, do whatever you can to help them. Especially, same theme, Black and brown trans folks, like they don't really get enough attention from not just the rest of the community, but the rest of the world. And I think we as a whole need a space to thrive in, like truly thrive, not just survive and scrape by, but be in a peaceful space. And I think being gracious with the LGBTQ plus folk is a good thing. Like, be patient with people's process and experiencing and expressing their own experience, and do your research. There's so much history about the violence against queer bodies, like not that many people seem to know about it. I think it's important for people to go out of their own way and be like the master of their own education sometimes, and really just learn about the world around you, and decolonize your language. Stop thinking about like LGBTQ plus people as like something other, because we've existed since the beginning of humanity. We've been here this whole time. The only thing is we've been taught that we're something that we're not. So I don't know, like rethink everything. Like, look at your community spaces. Is there only cis people? Is there any queer people at all? Is there any variation in your communities at all? And if there isn't, ask yourself why. What can you do to change that? If there's no access to people that you've thought of as other in your mind, then, reconsider what your idea of community is, definitely. And, what steps do you need to take to do that? So, yeah.
If I could piggyback off of what Kaya just said, I would say, like, as well as listening to us in our experiences, I think also giving us space and understanding that there are certain things that we don't want to talk about or haven't fully processed and therefore can't talk about. And like, it's one thing to like ask a question, but if somebody gives you a response that's like maybe like defensive or just makes it clear that they don't want to talk about that, like that is when like Google can become your best friend. Google has become my best friend in a lot of ways in learning things about various people and about myself and everything. So like the internet is like practically endless, and knowledge and information is practically endless. And like I was saying, like take your education into your own hands, like be your own educator. And don't expect us to be all the time. That goes for queer people, that goes for like Black and brown queer people, Black and brown trans people. Some of these situations that we're dealing with like today can be very hard for us to talk about. And but there's so much information, there's so many things to read, so many things to watch, so many things to listen to, that are right at your fingertips, literally. So I just wanted to add that onto Kaya's message.
So
I
what?
want to say this because I think it's important that people remember, think of who you're getting your information from as well. Like if you're instead of speaking to a queer person in person, if that's not possible for you and you're going out into the internet and you're learning about the queer community, make sure that you're citing the people that you're learning this stuff from, because a lot of the time we're hearing about queer experiences through like a cis person's lens, when there's plenty of opportunities for you to find, like there's blogs, there's vlogs, there's so many different variations of knowledge now. It's not just from like articles. Like there's people in real time speaking about what's going on in their life. So it's entirely possible to like, to really learn from the community without having to actively like, or not actively, without having to like, you know, ask maybe your queer coworker or something like that. You know what I mean? So I just want to put that out there. Just make sure you're like learning from like the people that are living it, not just the people that are observing.
And if I might add something too, in terms of some of the things that I'm learning and doing all this research on all these projects is you, first of all, to do something, you have to take personal responsibility to do something. That's like the first step. You got to say, I'm going to do something. But the other thing that I found is it's a little bit tricky because one LGBTQ person does not speak for the entire community, or just like one Black person does not, or a Hispanic person does not. And so you have to be, when you say you do your research, you have to always keep that in mind as you consider the sources of the knowledge that or the information that you're trying to get. But anyway, yeah, that rings true to me in terms of some of the things that I'm finding out in terms of taking the responsibility and then going and actually doing the work, doing the research, educating yourself. But yeah, anyone else want to comment on that?
I think the only other thing that I have to add is, on some level, try to remove yourself from the idea that you have to have a one answer, that you have to have a right or a wrong. I think getting into more of the idea that we respect humans, we respect individuals who have a lived experience that is separate from ours. We respect their choices, especially when they're doing no harm. Like, there is something to understanding that we all have different lived experiences. We all have different beliefs and family experiences, all sorts of things. And to be able to respect that you don't know, and you should trust that when someone says, this is my lived experience, you should trust them when they say that, especially when it's not causing you direct harm. It's not causing anyone direct harm. I think there is something to recognizing that and giving space for it. And on some level, it's like, it's none of your damn business to ask me or to make me prove why my lived experience belongs here. It belongs here because I lived it and I'm worth it, period.
Heck yeah, Hadassah. Can folks hear me? I have a weird internet connection. Yeah. So I would just add in, I mean, yes, everything that Kaya and Brian, Hadassah they just said. I just want to say, as a therapist working with the queer community, parents, kind of like Hadassah saying, like, just meet your kids where they're at, right? So it doesn't matter. Oftentimes when a kid comes into my office, I'll say, like, what are your pronouns today? Like, where are you in this exploration of gender, right? And like, wherever they're at is perfect for that moment, right? And I think that any challenge that you can do for yourself to meet your kids where they're at, meet anyone where they're at, obviously, but especially kids, I think parents get afraid of influencing or accepting a kid too much. But in my 15 years of experience, I've never had a kid be like, whoa, that was a weird, like, trans experience I had. I'm totally cis now. Like, it's never happened. And I think that if we can support this concept of gender being malleable, it's something that we can, shift and change, like we all do, right? That we can understand, the they, thems, we can understand how to meet people where they're at. I'd also say locally, if you want to get involved, and maybe covering these questions later, John, but I'll just do a little shout out that July 13th, if you are available, to meet us at Hempfield High School School Board to support just the inclusion of, transgender kids in sports in general. And then I would say, nationally, really focusing on the Equality Act. I put the link up in the chat a few messages ago, but that's on the HRC. It just kind of walks you right through what you can do to get involved to make sure the Equality Act gets passed. And, that then would allow for everything we're talking about, like total inclusive, well, will give us a step toward it, like being fully inclusive with, protections against our entire community. So.
Can I add, in agreement with everything that's been said, just support the LGBTQ community even when there are no representatives from the community around. Like when you hear your cousin or your uncle or your, neighbor saying things that are offensive or maybe misguided even, speak to them about it. It doesn't matter whether or not there's a queer person in your space. If you want to really support the community, you will do so at all times, in all spaces, regardless of who's there. And that takes a lot of courage and bravery, but also it makes a big difference. So I would say that, and also pay attention to who and where you are spending your money. Don't be funding or supporting businesses that are giving money to, homophobic politicians, and just do a little extra digging. Like has been said, Google is our friend and resource if we use it as such, and we can find out, where businesses, corporations, individuals are spending their money. And so we can use the money that we have for advancing, justice, and not unintentionally funding oppressive policies and politicians.
Thank you. I have one last question. So let's say you're with a group of friends, a group of folks, family or friends, whatever makeup, doesn't matter what makeup it is, and you wanted to pose a question, just like throw a discussion question out to that group of people. What would the question be? How would you spur them to talk about this and engage in meaningful dialogue about it? Any thoughts?
I feel like whenever I'm having conversations like that, or whenever I feel like bringing them up, it typically, in my position as a queer person, I think that it's typically like a comment will be made, and whether it's harmful or not, like just a comment will be made, and I'm like, hey, like can we pause and talk about that for a moment? I don't typically ask people all the time. Most of the people that I'm around, I usually have like a good idea of like who they are and what they're thinking and how they feel about things. But yeah, whenever something just comes up that might be a little confusing or might be a little like explorative, I try to like dig into that and get them thinking more about that, get myself thinking more about that. And just like bouncing questions back and forth like that, or bouncing experiences and talking back and forth like that. But it's never really like me starting it. It's more so me catching on to something that was said and kind of digging into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually really relate to that because I'm not typically the person that would be like, hey, what do you think of this? Like, it's more of like, if I'm in a space with maybe my peers, maybe not, if I hear something that I feel is necessary to challenge, I absolutely will every single time. Like I always hear a theme of like, like anti-Blackness and like the heteronormative, BS that you hear like in just normal conversation, whether it be friends or family. A lot of the time, my question for them is, who taught you that? How did you learn that? And like really get them thinking, like, is this my own personal idea? Is this something that I experienced and learned on my own? Or is it something that I was told is true or normal? And if that's the case, why? Why would they say that? Especially if you're living in a world where a lot of the time those like anti-Black ideas, anti-queer ideas are just not true. So that's my thing. It's like always examine your own thoughts. And like I said earlier, decolonize your mind, because a lot of the things that we were taught were a means to separate and control, you know what I mean? So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Anyone else? Hey, you know, wait, one more though. We in the chat, someone asked Kaya's reference to how you can have a loud voice to share. And do you all have any ideas or opportunities to engage those who are artistic and are a part of the community, but have a quieter voice? You know, they have gifts to share, but are reticent to do so. Any thoughts for folks like that?
Yeah, get
Yeah.
involved.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Plug in with the LGBT coalition, plug in with Karen and the people that she has on her team. There's always a place for everyone. Even if you don't feel like you have a voice for a louder platform, everyone's feelings and their lived experience and their story is important, and what they can lend to the collective is important. So I think getting involved in the events, I mean, we've had multiple events this month, right? So Karen is always advertising things that you can get involved in. So if it's just wanting to get involved and do something and feel supported at the same time, plug in. There's definitely stuff happening.
I just want to say, like, I haven't always been loud, okay? Like, it took me a long time to feel comfortable enough to present myself to people. So if you feel that your voice is quiet and you don't know exactly which platform to stand on for it to be heard, like Hadassah said, just plug in, just keep seeking it, keep looking for it, keep speaking. Like, don't let anybody tell you that you're either too quiet or too loud, because there's no such thing. The whole point is you have something to say. You just got to find a way to say it. So.
And I would also like to sort of, chime in, sort of Kai was saying is that, we're talking about artists here, right? So artists, this is at the forefront of this panel in particular. So, it's kind of hard to not have a voice as an artist. Like, that's a little bit of the point. But again, of course everyone does. And it's also not your job. Like, you have people that are like us, right? You come to us. And if you don't like what's happening at the coalition, and I'm a white non-binary person, talk to somebody else who's involved. Like, talk to Brian, they're cool. And, like anyone else. And like, please suggest things that we should be doing. We're always open for any kind of ideas. But in general, quite frankly, oftentimes the trans way of existence, it's hard enough to even leave your house. Your whole life is an act of political warfare, right? So like, I think that allowing yourself to rest when you need to rest, but also, reaching out to us if you need any help, please do. And I think, again, I will always chime in with, like, just aside from that, we have to stop pretending that religious freedom is a shield for hatred, right? So in any way that is involved with so much that's happening, especially in Lancaster County, it's time to make it stop.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. Yeah, I think that was very good, all of it. I want to thank you all. A couple of housekeeping notes. First of all, you can purchase the record to Volume 2 through our website, musicforeveryone.org. So please do. I think you'll find not only the music and the art and the poetry, but also the historical information, the educational information of value. Volume 3 will be next, and that's going to feature speech by Frederick Douglass and music by Corio and a historical narrative by Dr. Leroy Hopkins, poetry by Rashid Noah, and the community benefit organization is Crispus Attucks. So that will be coming out in around August sometime. That's Volume 3. And we have many more after that. And what I want to do, though, if you don't mind, I'll indulge me this. I'm going to leave you with a quote, and it's a quote from Otis Johnson. And he's an educator, civic leader, and former mayor of Savannah, Georgia. His quote, he said, "If you believe in a cause, be willing to stand up for that cause with 1 million people or by yourself." So again, I want to thank all your panelists. Thank you so much for your contribution to this project. We are very grateful. We've learned an awful lot from you, and hopefully we'll be able to continue to do that. And, again, I want to thank our sponsors for allowing us, giving us the support to do this. And I would, as the executive director, I would be remiss if I did not also mention that we continue to look for sponsors for this project. It's going to be a 2-year project, maybe even longer when it's all said and done. And we continue to look for sponsors. So if you want to do something, if you're a business out there, an individual wants to do something in terms of more than just a social justice statement, something concrete, something really tangible to make a difference, please. I think this is a project that is worthy of that type of support. So again, thanks for all the panelists. Thanks for everyone for tuning in, and stay safe out there. Appreciate it.